Good morning. I'm Nicola Barrett, Chief Corporate Learning Officer at Emory Executive Education. And it's great to have you here for today's Business Over Breakfast webinar focused on good growth and how brands win with social impact. Today, many of us as consumers expect more than just great products. We want brands to stand for something meaningful. And companies like Coca-Cola, which has invested in water stewardship and sustainable packaging, and Nike, whose Move to Zero initiative targets zero carbon and zero waste, are leading the way. Unilever has embedded purpose into its portfolio with brands like Dove promoting self-esteem and Ben & Jerry's advocating for social justice. Although that has been experiencing a bit of a rocky road in the last several months, culminating in Jerry Greenfield stepping down after almost 50 years and being escorted out of the building in handcuffs. In this session, Professor Omar Rodriguez-Vila will share research-based insights and examples to show how companies can grow by doing good, strategically, measurably, and sustainably. Many of you will know Omar Rodriguez-Vila from previous Business Over Breakfast. He's a professor in the practice of marketing here at Goizueta and is the academic director of Goizueta Business School's Institute for Business and Society. Following a successful career leading global marketing teams at Coca-Cola, Omar shifted to academia, and his primary research focus is forces transforming the practice of marketing. He studies how environmental and social sustainability considerations are changing the nature of marketing activities, and his work entitled Competing on Social Purpose was published in HBR in September of 2017 and then republished in 2020 as part of a special edition on leadership and purpose. He is currently leading research into how brands communicate societal benefits in social media and into the marketplace practices of anti-racist brands. He also studies how firms are evolving their marketing capabilities in order to compete in technology-led market environments. Omar's going to spend about 30-35 minutes sharing his insights and perspective. Please post any questions you have in the Q&A box and also in the chat, and we'll try and get to all of those questions along the way. Before I hand the baton to Omar, I did want to highlight a couple of upcoming courses that might be of interest to anybody on this Business Over Breakfast. First of all, navigating change for growth. So whatever you do with the insights that Omar is sharing today, it requires you to change. And so how do you change and create a change initiative, and how do you make sure that change initiative actually works? So this course is really around helping you bring your specific change initiative and developing a path forward to navigate disruptive waters and create and develop a growth mindset. The other one is developing a culture of experimentation, which is an online course really designed with a specific goal of nurturing an innovative business culture to fuel growth. So we're going to share some of the information about that in the chat. Now it's time to hand over to Omar.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Yes, great. I'm going to try to share my slides here. Can you see my slides?
We can see your slides.
Yes, okay, we're set. Well, good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to Nicola and her team to share with you work of a recent book I published with Sundar Bharadwaj, who's a chair professor of marketing at the University of Georgia. Him and I have been doing research in this space for over a decade. And it's a topic that I think has gone through a lot of ups and downs. And hopefully in my session today, I'll be able to leave you with a few new perspectives on how to think about the role of social impact in business. And I will start by saying that these two topics, like business impact and social impact, normally are treated as separate entities in a business environment, right? Like Nicola said, before I did my PhD and I moved to academia, I worked for about 16 years at the Coca-Cola company. And I was a marketing leader in global roles, and I worked in China and Argentina, etc. And frankly, I never considered issues of social impact while I was working on trying to drive business impact. Until one moment when I was in China and we went to visit some of the programs that the company had in communities near the area of Inner Mongolia. And it just hit me that there was a lot of effort, that there were other people in the company, mainly people in community affairs or community relations, that were doing that frankly was work that was impactful, but it was not known by our customers. And I began to wonder if there was a relationship that could be better explored between social impact and business impact. And I think that relationship really has, over the last 20 years, we have seen more and more companies try to explore that intersection, right? Is it possible to build a product, a service, or a brand that actually competes more effectively because it has as one of its benefits an aspect of environmental or social contributions? So mainly I want you to know that when I use the term social impact, I am talking about environmental or societal benefits, okay? I'm not just talking about social in terms of people, also the environment, right? So in that case, and I think it's well known that there are many companies, and Nicola mentioned some of them, that have been exploring this intersection. And here you have a set of examples that are probably from the last 10 years or so, right? Patagonia goes way back, and Body Shop was probably one of the first ones to really connect behaviors that we would associate with more sustainable practices with the actual product offering, right? The lack of use of animals in testing was one of the main things that their founder really believed on. Patagonia has been promoting and provoking changes in legislation and protection in the environment, and embedding that position into a lot of the work that they do with customers and with their products. But on top of that, we have many other examples here. And Pepsi had the Pepsi Refresh project in about 2012, where they donated money based on people's votes for causes. And always at a very popular campaign of called Like a Girl, trying to kind of change perceptions of what that statement meant and empower girls in sports. Gillette had a message against what at the time what they called toxic masculinity. Nike focused a lot on equality. A beer brand, Tecate, in Mexico, took a very strong stance against domestic violence. And in fact, they launched a campaign telling customers that if they drank their beer and then went home and committed an act of domestic violence, they didn't want them as customers. Like, don't drink Tecate. That was their campaign. Budweiser used a Super Bowl ad, and you guys know that Super Bowl ads are not cheap. Used a Super Bowl ad to communicate the fact that they were now being manufactured and produced using renewable energy, particularly wind. KLM did a campaign around promoting flying responsibly, and in fact, it was actually provoking people to think about the fact that maybe they don't need to travel, particularly within Europe. Maybe they could take a train, maybe they could do a Zoom call and like reduce your travel so that we could reduce emissions. That was the whole campaign. And there are more, okay? The last one I would mention is Hellmann's. This is more recent. This is the 2024 Hellmann's mayonnaise, really focusing on trying to reduce food waste at home. And the reason I'm bringing up all these examples to you is because the Pepsi Refresh projects lasted about 2 years. And during that period of time, the company lost about 5% market share. The Gillette toxic masculinity ad, you probably heard how controversial that was, also led to a decline in sales. And the program lasted about 6 months. Always Like a Girl was very successful, but 2 years later, that message is no longer present. Hellmann's had to stop their program because of investor complaints. Nike is not as prevalent talking about equality right now. Tecate stopped talking about their program after a year. The same with Bank of America. The same with Budweiser. 1 year later, you didn't see those messages anymore. KLM actually faced litigation on greenwashing, which they lost last year. KFC, the same. The point I'm trying to make here is that, and in fact, we counted this, right? So we looked at, I can't claim this is a holistic count, but we looked at 235 programs like the ones I was showing you, and the incidents when they were starting. And notice that there was a lot that started this space of social impact and business impact intersection in marketing started to heat up around 2010, 2012, and it peaked around 2020, like during the pandemic. But since then, a lot of these programs have started to be taken off air, figuratively speaking. And in fact, of the ones that we counted, we could find only 12% of them still active. And this is an important signal for me of one of the issues that I'm going to talk about first, because you know that companies, when they start an initiative, if that initiative doesn't last, it has to do something with the performance of that initiative. If that initiative is working for their business, they find ways to keep it alive. You know that's reality. And what we are seeing is that in this first wave of the intersection of social impact and business impact, there were a lot of launches, a lot of programs that were started, but that ended relatively quickly. And in fact, I listened to the Global Consumer Staples Conference, the Barclays Global Consumer Staples Conference that happened last month. I listened to it intently because there are many companies in there, like Unilever, like Coca-Cola, like PepsiCo, like Mondelez. There are CPG companies that were actually a lot of the training grounds for these programs. And in 14 of the presentations I listened to, there were no mentions of issues of social impact, what is termed as purpose, etc. And this, basically, I'm building up to a problem that I see with the whole effort about purpose and brands, okay? and that I believe is behind this apparent retreat, okay, from this practice. And there are really three things that me and Sundar have found that maybe we're not helping. The first one is the research itself. Because I remember, we interviewed many chief sustainability officers and many CMOs when we're doing the research for our HBR article, trying to understand the mindset of managers around this topic and the practice around it. And we heard a lot of people make statements, general statements about consumers desiring companies to do certain things, right? But when we actually studied the way consumers were making choices for different products, we didn't see that. We did not see very high level sustainability claims as being real main drivers of choice. It varied by category. And in some categories, we did see it more than others, but it wasn't like at the numbers that we were seeing the reports coming out from Accenture or McKinsey or BCG or all these consulting firms. But when you dig into the research they were doing, they were mainly using declared preference research methodologies. That is, asking people directly, hey, to what extent would you like to buy products from a responsible company? These were literally questions that were in this report, right? And that way of exploring demand for social impact in brands is problematic because it's filled with response and moral desirability bias, right? So you get percentages that are very high, but they're not indicative of drivers of choice. They're indicative of general attitudes. And I think there were many reports. I can count, 20, 25 reports that were being issued, giving these headlines that we believe created a lot of noise in the demand signals. that the demand was present, but was latent, but was not really as large as this report was proposing it. So managers were developing programs expecting a size of response that was not present. Okay, that's one issue. The other one is that there was, in our view, an oversimplification of the causal link here. That there was a general sense that all you had to do was just pick a cause and basically do a nice story around it. And that was enough to drive not just attention, but desire for your product. And that is a vast oversimplification of the general complexities of driving consumer choice. But more importantly, in this space, research has shown there are a lot of nuances by category of what matters, what doesn't matter, what can work and what can work against you. And we felt that a lot of those things were at times overlooked. And a lot of brands were just looking at what Dove did and trying to replicate that same blueprint, that same model, that same playbook. And again, leading to programs that were not getting the results that were intended. So we call this version 1.0. It had the right intent. Let's explore this potential intersection. And there were some brands that were very successful. And Nicola talked about Dove. 20 years later, they are still finding growth in that intersection between challenging the narrow depiction of beauty in the marketplace and their products and brands. Okay, they are being successful in this version 1.0.
Omar,
that were not.
Omar,
Yeah.
Before you move further on in your presentation, Marsha asks, related to the slide where you had the 12%, what's the normal duration of successful marketing ads? That those are not subject to removal based on what you explained.
Oh,
so
that's a great question, because the ads change all the time.
Right.
Ads change all the time. Campaigns don't. You see, so you may have a campaign. Let's say Coke had a campaign on open happiness. They had 50 different ads around that campaign, but that campaign lasts 3-5 years. If the campaign is working, the general ideas of the messages you're communicating, they last. Dove has been talking about real beauty for 20 years.
Right.
They last. So my observation was not about the ad was dropped. That happens all the time. My observation was the whole effort around bringing social impact into the brand was dropped.
Understood. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. So our point here is that was version 1.0. There is a version 2.0 of this exploration of the intersection between social impact and business that is emerging out of these last 10 years. And we believe it's a version that's better suited for actually the results we're looking for. And I'm going to start by illustrating this version 2.0 by telling you the story of Tim van de Kauken. He's a Dutch investigative journalist. He had a show where he explored different issues in society, went from a journalistic lens, and then kind of exposed the issues. And in one holiday he was taking in Africa, he came across issues of human trafficking and child labor in cocoa plantations. And he began to investigate how broadly present that was. And he realized that actually the main plantations that were providing the cocoa that was used by chocolate manufacturers and producers like Nestle, etc., they were very much relying on child labor, and at times in terrible conditions, working conditions. So he comes back to the Netherlands, and he decides to go to a supermarket and buy, 5-10 bars of chocolate, okay? And he goes to the courthouse, stands in front of the courthouse with his bag of chocolate, and he says, "Guys, you need to arrest me." And he starts with signs, "Please arrest me. I have been funding human trafficking and child labor." And the spokesperson for the courthouse comes out. It's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Van Derken, this is ridiculous. We can't arrest you for buying 10 bars of chocolate. He's like, but I actually bought them, and I am, through my money, I am supporting and funding this effort that they have in place. And so I've committed a crime. Can you fund human trafficking? He's like, no, you can't. But that's what I just did. No, I'm sorry. This is just a ploy. You gotta go. So that got some attention, but it didn't really strike the change he was after. So he decided to basically launch a brand of chocolate. I don't know if you're familiar. Maybe some of you are familiar with Tony's Chocolunis. And you know, it got to the US about 2 to 3 years ago. They launched it in first, of course, in Holland, but then it's been spreading throughout Europe as well. I want to show you a brief video that illustrates kind of the issue he's trying to address. Okay, so let's take a look, and then I'm going to finish up the story.
Je suis Kamsame Félix, j'ai 16 ans. J'ai travaillé dans une plantation de cacao de 1999 en 2003. Je n'étais pas payé. J'étais forcé de travailler.
Millions of children, yes.
Working as slaves.
Working as slaves.
J'étais forcé de travailler. Je n'avais pas la liberté pour quitter l'école.
And we are responsible for that.
Yes, we are.
In our perfect world, a consumer would never have to choose between a slave-free chocolate bar and one that is produced with the risk of child exploitation behind it.
But call them. Call Nestle. Ask them. See what they say.
Let's face it, slavery exists.
Oh yeah?
Clearly.
Because they
are so desperately poor.
because they don't get paid enough by Nestle or by the companies they work for.
That's it. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Et puis on vous laisse jamais causer entre parents. Si on te voit causer avec ton parent, bon, on te tue ou bien on te mate très bien là et puis on te fait changer de compte.
This is now the 21st century. It's unthinkable that we would sit by and allow child slave labor to continue.
Non, il faut faire quelque chose, forcément.
That is the background. This is what their chocolate looks like when you open it. Now, what is different about this? This is clearly different, right? Like normally you open a chocolate bar and the pieces are symmetrical, right? By design, because you want to be able to share them with other people or, you know, decide how much to eat. And they're all squares or rectangles, but they're all equally sized. You open a Tony's, and the first thing you realize is that this is very different. And the pieces are not all equally sized. They're all small, large, different sizes. Why? Well, if you care to find out why, you'll realize that the reason is this is a signal of the inequity in the supply chain, the signal of the lack of equality in the share of value between the companies and the farmers, so, which is core to what they are trying to provoke, right? And then, importantly, this element of their supply chain, which they have now designed a new supply chain that significantly lowers the prevalence of child labor. In fact, third parties have studied now the prevalence of child labor. Industry average is close to 47%. In Tony's open chain, which is the name they gave it, it's close to 4%. At the same time, this is one of the fastest growing chocolate bars in the United States. Last year, it grew 86% in the US, 32% globally, okay? And tremendous business impact, which drives social impact, and the social impact they are designing to drive makes them different and drives their business impact. You see that loop? Now, importantly, they're not alone. So they need scale for this revised supply chain in order to lower the cost and be able to improve their margins. You know that this is possible. Anytime you make a supply chain change of this size, you're moving away from the established processes that allow better margins. So how are they getting to scale? they're recruiting other companies. And now you see here a list of other companies. Some of them are retailers, some of them are product producers that are aligning to and joining their open chain. Again, growing their scale, enabling their business to be more sustainable as they grow and protect their margins as they grow. This is an example of what we call good growth, okay? Which is now I'm designing this intersection between social impact and business impact in a way that drives customer demand. So it helps me compete more effectively by creating tangible and meaningful societal benefits. Not by me taking stands on social issues, but by me creating tangible social benefits, like the case of Tony's. You see? Now, what evidence do we have that this sort of work is working? Okay, I'm going to share with you some research that we've done similar research to this, but I'm going to cite research from NYU, the Center for Sustainable Business. They looked at data from IRI, which is basically scanner data. So imagine every time you go in and you use your Publix card or Kroger card and you scan, you get all the detailed information of the product label and the transaction. And they identify product labels that had specific social impact benefits embedded in them and those that did not. So here's an example, just so you understand what they did. Look, notice the packaging of Lindt. Notice that it has a lot of information about the product, 95% cocoa, dark chocolate, it has symbols of quality, the Lindt brand, etc. But it's got no claims of social impact. You see that? Like if we were rating this package here on the presence of social impact benefits, it would be 0. Okay? That doesn't make it good or bad. All I'm saying is that this would be 0. And then when we look at this other competitor, 88% cocoa, high, dark chocolate too, but a higher presence of social impact. So here you have 10% of net profits to serve wildlife, is endangered species. They have a whole mission around using their business to protect endangered species, okay? And there's also talk about non-GMO and fair trade practices, etc. So in this case, this would be low in social impact and high in social impact presence in the packaging. Now, they have looked at the growth rate of both of those types of products over time, since 2019 to 2024. And here is, of course, in this case, we're not asking consumers to tell us their attitudes toward these issues. We're just observing their buying behavior and seeing that products with social impact are outgrowing in speed of growth the more conventional products. And they are the average share of growth. It's significant. It's not only, it used to be 24%, it's now 41%. Okay. So 5-year CAGR is around 12% versus 5% for conventional products. This is a signal that these claims are beginning to be perceived as benefits. It's important. The moment they are perceived as benefits and attributes, they become part of the choice equation. Then it can help you compete and win, you see? Now, the playbook or the way of exploring that intersection, we believe it needs to be different from version 1.0 in 3 ways. And the first one is focus on customer value, not brand values. The version 1.0 focus a lot on what are the values of your brand, what are the issues you want to stand for, and then communicating those values, right? And the idea was that consumers would see the values of the brand. If those values resonated with them, they would then prefer the brand. And what we see in version 2.0 is really brands moving away from that notion and really just focusing on customer value. Like we just saw with Tony Chocolooni's. Now, I'm going to give you a few examples of this. The first one is from P&G. And by the way, in version 2.0, brands are very much using the product life cycle to explore opportunities to create customer value. And here you see a simplified version of what P&G showed in their sustainability report of the product, the energy impact of the products, the energy footprint of the products. And what I want you to call your attention to here is that they looked at the emissions and energy impact across distribution, packaging, end of life, ingredients, and then at-home use. And clearly what you see is that largest percentage of the energy impact and emissions what's happening at home in the way consumers were using their products. So now you have an environmental goal. You try to reduce your overall footprint, but you realize that 60% of it's outside your manufacturing plant. How are they tackling this? By creating customer value. So you must have seen over the last 3-4 years this effort towards P&G to talk about cold water washing. And that has been enabled by innovation in the product, particularly in their detergents, that provide an equally effective wash, even if you use cold water or hot water. And then notice the way they're talking about washing in cold. The argument is not about reducing emissions. The argument is it's customer centric, right? It's thinking about what does the customer care about? Saving money, saving in the energy bill. That's what we're focusing on. Again, customer value, not brand values here. Same thing with Cascade. They did the same life cycle analysis, and they realized issue is water in this case, not energy. And a lot of consumers were pre-washing dishes before putting them in the dishwashers. By the way, I'm guilty as charged. Maybe some of you do too. I used to do that too. And again, through product innovation, they work to reduce the water footprint, but by talking not about reduce water and save the environment, by talking about convenience. You can now get clean dishes without pre-washing. Don't worry about pre-washing. Again, a convenience, customer value, which we know drives choice, not an environmental social stance. You see? Customer value, not brand value. Last example I give you, tuna. Great source of protein. Maybe I eat a lot of it. Maybe many of you do too. What is the concern with tuna? Is there any concern we should have about eating tuna like this? And I mean, I cannot hear you right now, but I suspect you might be thinking mercury, right? So that's an issue. And here comes Safe Catch. It's a startup. It has a startup story that connected the founders with this issue, and they created technology that enabled the testing of every tuna that was caught for mercury levels. And they now can ensure that the tuna that they sell has the lowest mercury, not just in the market, significantly lower than even the FDA limit. Okay, so now you have here a customer benefit, right? But at the same time, it's addressing an issue that comes from environmental degradation, which is part of the reason that the levels of mercury are growing in large fish like tuna. So again, a different way of competing, creating customer value using social impact. Second, where do we look for these areas of customer value? Focus on your externalities, not social causes, okay? And this, I mean, a lot of this comes from research. In this case, I'm going to cite research by one of my colleagues, Dion Nickerson, and Michael Lowe and Adita. They looked at, well, they started with thousands of CSR and social impact initiatives of companies. And eventually they found a set that they could compare across companies that had done 3 different types of programs. But broadly speaking, there was a set of CSR programs, social impact programs, that were not related to the firm externalities, okay? So think of Coca-Cola doing reforestation efforts and planting trees, versus programs that were connected to the firm externalities. So think about Coca-Cola changing packaging or increasing recyclability of their plastics, okay? And what they found in their study, very thorough analysis about the business impact of these different types of programs, they found that those that were addressing a firm externality generated a sales lift of around 3 to 4%. And those that were dealing with an unrelated cause actually generated a sales drop, okay? And this is an important result because it provides guidance on if I'm trying to look for this intersection between social impact and business impact, start with your externalities. Don't go out there asking consumers what social issues they care about and then try to align with them. Focus on your externalities. And one way you can think about it is actually applying the customer journey map. And the customer journey map is very commonly used in marketing, right? And we understand customer experience. But notice that oftentimes we start at awareness of our brand and we end at purchase or repurchase. So in this case, extend it and explore to what extent the start of life of your product and the end of life of your product is playing a role on pain points or delight points by your consumers, okay? I'll give you a few quick examples on start of life. The bottle, we know plastic is an issue, it's an environmental issue. And we know companies like Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and others are investing heavily in trying to address it. And one question is, a lot of PET bottles come from virgin plastic. What if at least step one, we could shift to bottles that are 100% created with recycled plastic? So we embed some circularity in the production process. That's beginning of life, right? That's start of life issue. And the question is, would that matter to customers, right? Or not? So we actually tested that. We studied, we worked with the Coke team in their water brand to study this. And the first thing is the percentage of consumers that prioritize the type of plastic and the fact if it was made out of recycled plastic or not in the marketplace. Would people even care? We found that 32% of the market actually made that, for them, that was one of the top 3 criteria when making choices. It wasn't necessarily the main one, but it was top 3. So it mattered. But just as importantly, we found 57% to whom it didn't matter at all. And in 11% that it would turn them off, right? That's reality. Now, when you look at that, you could also argue, well, a third of the market seems to be seeing this as a desirable attribute. That's a large enough segment, right? Then we looked at to what extent that would impact purchase probability, and we found very strong effects on purchase probability, both in terms of people that consume their brand frequently and those that consume it infrequently. That change led Coca-Cola to then test. And you might have remembered this about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. There was a change in the label, which was fascinating. It went from mainly a label about Dasani, the brand, to mainly a label about the type of plastic used in recycled bottle. They tested this in Texas. They found a 20% increase in sales. And as a result of that, they expanded it across their portfolio and across the country. Now, at this point, it still represents an increase in their cost because you're moving away from virgin plastic, which is the most efficient one, but they're building scale, right, to this better position. Vella, you're probably aware of this brand. Is one of the hottest fashion brands right now among youth. One of their benefits is the start of life, okay? And the way that use recycle plastic and recycled polyester in their production, making that a benefit. Last example of start of life, Dell. They launched a partnership with almost like 20 other companies to build the first ocean plastic supply chain. And they partnered with Lonely Whale to fund efforts to capture plastic in river exits to prevent it from getting into the ocean. And they turned that material into a lot of the product inside the Dell Latitude series. Now, importantly, Dell says that this gave them a procurement advantage in their business-to-business market because this helped companies add the procurement of technology products made with recycled plastic as part of their ESG goals, okay? End of life. It's another place you can look for opportunities. I mean, cleaning products. What do we do? What do we do with these bottles when we finish them? 9 out of 10 times we know what we do, right? We throw them out in the hope that they get recycled. But unfortunately, we also know that the percentage of plastic that gets recycled right now is not even close to what it should be. And here comes Sarah Yu, the founder of Blue Land. She launched Blue Land in around 2019. Right now, it's available in Target, Whole Foods. It's growing very fast. And their whole idea, cleaning without plastic, okay? It's a different business model. You get a bottle that you don't have to throw away. And when you run out of product, you get tablets that come in paper bags that you throw in, you put the water from your house in there, you wait a minute, and you have your cleaning product again. It's a subscription-based business, but now it's being sold in retail. It's very successful. Again, adding value to customers, looking at the journey, but considering the end of life as a pain point and eliminating that. And the last one I'll talk about is designing products, not stories. You see, version 1.0 rely a lot on advertising and storytelling. Version 2.0 is about designing products and business models. And the first example I use is, what do we do when our products stop working, right? Like if you have a bike, right? Maybe some of you have a bike, I have my bike. The bike breaks down. What do? Do you throw it out? No, right? That'll be crazy. You go in and you fix the chain, or you change the tire, you fix it. What do you do when your AirPods break down, or the battery runs out, which it's designed to last about 2 years? What do? Do you fix it? By the way, you can't, because the AirPods are designed not to be fixable. They have a rating of 0/10 in the iFixit score of repairability. That is a problem for some consumers that actually care about the right to repair. And here comes Fairphone, again, from Holland. And they're designing technology products that can be fixed. Now, this is something that it was commonplace 20 years ago, right? But increasingly, technology companies have been launching products that are very difficult to fix. As part of a model to drive upgrades and sell new versions, which makes sense. It drives growth, but it also creates tremendous amounts of e-waste. So you have companies like Fairphone now embedding in their product design this ability for fixing and extending the life that addresses the needs, maybe not of the whole market, but there's a segment of the market in which they compete that they can address the needs better than the alternatives. Autodesk, the same, embedding green building design into their software to allow engineers or architects to design buildings and manage and understand and reduce energy efficiency, energy effects, water effects by being able to real time identify the impact of different design choices on environmental criteria that they may have. Lastly, for HP, they changed. They added a business model, a subscription-based business model to sell the lovely cartridges in our printer that runs out every 2 months, normally at the worst time, right? When you need to print that page, and then it's like, oh, you run out of red or whatever, magenta. But their subscription-based business to get people to receive the cartridges in their house added one important aspect, which is what do I do with the cartridge that is run out? And I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but HP has designed in this process a very easy way to recycle these cartridges. And you just put it in an envelope they give you and just put it in your mailbox. And that's it. It's like, instead of putting it in the trash bin, you put it in the mailbox. They get it back and they are recycling and repurposing the plastic from those ink cartridges back into other ink cartridges, building circularity in the process. Again, embedding the social impact in their products, not their story. So this is basically what we're talking about, this loop of designing products that are focusing on creating customer value, by addressing externalities, not just social causes in general, in ways that are embedded in the product, not just stories or advertising. And the last thing I want you to consider is this. If you're Blueland, right, and you're competing, you launch this product, and you basically your value proposition is cleaning without the plastic, okay? You're eliminating the throwaway. What do you do if you are an existing competitor in that business? Your Tide or your Windex, right? And what do you do? Because your business model is vastly different from this one. The same with Fairphone or Tonics, right? Your business model is very different. You can't directly compete against them with that same benefit. So what do we call when a product comes in, displaces incumbents, and captures growth that the incumbent cannot stop other than by lowering price, right? They cannot replicate that benefit, at least for a period of time. What do we call that? We call it disruptive innovation. And here's my last point. I want you to think about these efforts of good growth in the same way you would think about new technologies having the potential of driving disruptive innovation and competitive advantage. Because this changes the rules of the games in ways that the incumbents sometimes find hard to replicate. And that will give you an advantage. So just to end, basically, this intersection of business impact and social impact is very real, and it's driving results. There was a first effort over the last 15 years, which we call version 1.0, that yielded some successes, but a lot of misfiring. And we think that as a result of that effort, there's a version 2.0 emerging, that it's more of a growth strategy than a social responsibility issue. And it has three characteristics. It focuses on customer value, number of values. It addresses externalities, not just general causes. And it's designed to the product experience, it's not the stories. And we think that these new practices are actually creating almost like a new market for products that generate benefits with social impact. I'm going to stop there. We have about 10 minutes for questions, and hopefully you have some questions.
We've got questions. You have generated some questions, Omar. The first one, Dina asks, in doing this work, has it caused any shifts in your allegiance based on a company's products or social platform?
My personal allegiance.
Yeah.
I mean, but I would say that that's unrelated to the change. I care about these topics, but yes. So in studying this, I've become more and more aware of other companies and what they're doing. And frankly, I have found new ways of admiring companies. This is really hard. What I'm just presenting here, I'm trying to make the case, to plant a seed, to hopefully provoke you to consider this. But no questions about this. This is harder than growing your traditional way, you know? So when I see companies like HP, when I buy my cartridge and I order a new one and I get that envelope with the recycle, I literally give them a standing ovation, because I know how hard it is to change an incumbent and existing business model and evolve it into a new one that reduces an externality while at the same time drives growth. But when you do it effectively, it's fantastic. To me, it is actually one of the challenges of the new business leaders of today. And so I also find reason to celebrate, not just to criticize. Right.
I think that leads into Shankar's question about how do you balance between being socially responsible, between socially responsible causes and satisfying stakeholders to show business growth. As an executive, we're incentivized to show short-term growth impact. And so how do you balance that with enhancing the brand value? And
Great question. Yeah. And you don't. This is what version 2.0 is about. There is no, I never talked about social responsibility. I talked about growth. So So if you think about Blue Land, they're not talking about, oh, this is what we do to be socially responsible. They're talking about this is what we do to compete and to grow and create value for our shareholders. We are inventing a way of creating household cleaning products that eliminate the pain point of consumers around plastic, right? Particularly at the end of life. That gives them an edge. It gives them an advantage. That's what version 2.0 is about. Connect them. And if you can't connect them, that's fine too. So the moment I say that social impact is a strategy, that means it's a choice. It's not a requirement, you see? And if you don't see an opportunity to grow your business by embedding social impact in this way, don't do it. You can still do a lot of environmentally responsible things in your supply chain. You still have ESG goals. You still have other initiatives with your employees. Just don't bring it into your customer experience because it won't drive demand. It won't help you compete, you see? So I think if you keep those two things together, you avoid the issue.
And I think you've also then answered Kibiam's question. So they ask, I've always been curious whenever I see charts that categorize or call a company a social impact contributor. Is it just when a company meets at least one social impact category, or is it the entire supply chain, or is there a different way to approach this? I think you've been saying there's a different way to approach this.
Yeah, I love this question because it invites the reality that we're not dealing with absolutes here. No company is perfect. No social impact effort is complete. And you're going to have ambiguity. So you're going to have firms, like, I'll give you an example of Tony Chocolunis, okay? Fantastic work on the supply side, right? But those chocolate bars still have 34 grams of sugar, right? So now you're telling, okay, oh, positive, negative. Yes, both coexist. The question is, are you growing in a way that at the same time is reducing a negative externality? That's the goal. The goal is not perfection. The goal is improving. It's not contributing to and augmenting the negative externalities of the past. In fact, they are tackling the sugar issue now on their product. But it's just an illustration that you have to be comfortable dealing with the fact that we're making progress on one thing, even though we're not perfect on another.
I'm not sure I like chocolate without sugar. Hannah asks, I really like the point about social impact driving customer value. Some might say corporate boards are positioning companies this way partly in response to reputational risk and shifting sentiment in favor of consumer known concerns. In your view, how is this different from sentiment-driven marketing that we've seen in the past?
Sentiment-driven marketing. Okay, so what I can tell you is this. In the past, by the past, I mean version 1.0.
Yeah, right.
The way I thought people study this was what causes my consumers care about. Let's say what causes millennials care about. And then maybe they did surveys to explore, if my brand associated with that cause, what would you think of my brand? Those kinds of, so that sentiment to the extent that it's kind of in that way. And that approach of trying to build a business case is problematic. And for the reasons I explained earlier. In version 2.0, it doesn't rely so much on sentiment, it relies more on behaviors. So what is driving people's choices when they're picking a product in my category? And when we study the role of social impact in a choice, we compare it relative to other important things in their choice: quality, price, taste, whatever, size, all the features. And that's the way you need to do it. You can't study this like in isolation separately. You need to look at it because consumers will consider all of those things together. And they get a more accurate view of the demand, of the market demand. And that's why you saw in the bottled water example I showed that it was a third of the market. It wasn't 75% of the market. It was a third. And 57% didn't care. When you ask it that way, you get a more accurate view of the market.
I think we've got time for one very short question. Shankar asks, what are the incentives available for business from government entities? I see a lot of sustainability programs around the world driven by government programs. Have you looked at the government impact as a factor in this in 2.0?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Different governments have had different approaches. In India, in fact, there is a law that requires firms to invest, I think somewhere like 3%, 2% of their revenues on CSR. I honestly, I don't think regulation is the best incentive because it can lead to compliance. And version 2.0 is not about compliance. It's about opportunity and growth. And that's driven when you're pursuing maximizing shareholder value. So I think in all the examples I showed you, there are companies trying to win by addressing an externality. You see, I think that's the best incentive. That's what gets investors paying attention. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And consumers too, right?
Consumers.
Well, thank you so much, Omar. This has been really interesting to see this shift and hear about this shift and see the data and the research. I'm going to hand over to Kavita to end the webinar today.
Thank you, Omar, for provoking us to make thoughtful purchase as well as growth decisions. That was a great presentation. Looking ahead with Business Over Breakfast, we have on October 16th, Disambiguating Risk and Resilience with Steve Walton and Amy Gregg. On November 6th, we have the risks of offering free goods and services with Saloni Vistani. And also we have some courses coming up. We have the online asynchronous certificate courses that run monthly on AI and analytics. We have courses coming up as quickly as November 1st if you'd like to sign up. On October 8th and 9th, we have executive communication and leadership presence in person on campus. We have navigating change for growth on November 3rd and 4th in person. And in the beginning of the year, we have executive coaching program starting in January 2026, which is virtual. And thank you for joining us this morning. Hope you're starting to enjoy, if you are in Atlanta or in the Southeast, the beautiful fall that has started to kick in. And hope you guys have a great week and a great day. Thank you.